As mentioned a minute ago, today's webinar features a great partner of Sodick. That is Foster Corporation and their CEO, Larry Accarulo. Larry is a founder of and CEO of Foster, which is a developer and manufacturer of critical polymer compounds for medical devices, as well as drug delivery. Foster was incorporated in 1989, specializes in melt extrusion blending and forming of highly regulated materials, which would include implantable polymers and bioresorbable drug delivery polymers, such as, you'll find these materials in catheters, combination devices, controlled release delivery systems. We know that through my conversations this morning with Larry, he has been an active part of the plastic industry since he was 18 years old. And I think we agreed that was 15 years ago, Larry?
That was a couple of years ago. Yep.
Yeah. He has received bachelor's degree in plastics engineering from UMass Lowell. His master's degree in material sciences from University of Connecticut, and his PhD in engineering management from Kennedy Western University. Larry has many interests as well as patents that are related to the field of nanocomposites, cross-linkable polymers, lubricated and drug-filled polymers for medical device and pharmaceutical use. So with that, a couple logistical things. We will have a question and answer session after Larry finishes up his presentation this morning. And we'll do that through the Q&A box to your lower right corner of the WebEx screen. You can send it via chat or Q&A. Make sure you send those in to the host. You can send those in during the presentation if you want. I'll compile the list. And once Larry is done, we will go ahead and start the questions that we've received and let Larry have some time to answer those. I guess without further ado, Larry, the floor is yours.
Okay. Thank you, Weston. And thank you, everybody, for signing in today. I know it's a Wednesday afternoon, midweek, and mid-afternoon. So we'll try and keep this as interesting as possible. Weston and I, we go back a few years now, and he has really been supportive and helpful, not only from the sales aspect, but from the engineering and technical aspect of helping us install a Sodick machine at Foster Corporation for material product development. I go back quite a few years with Len Hampton. Used to see Len at all the MPE shows, and I'd stop over by the Sodick booth, and he'd be out there by the molding machine, and I'd just be mesmerized by the machine, just the way it operated, the precision of the parts, and I'd just be staring at it for 20 minutes and always, wish that, I could actually afford one to buy one. But it took a few years after that, and Len was very patient, and I think it was a couple of years ago that Weston and Len at a NPE again, we decided, let's get one, because a lot of our customers have the Sodick machines for molding bioresorbable polymers, and that's an area that we spent quite a bit of time in over the last several years. So the talk is going to be on implantable medical plastics, really, and medical applications. And if you ride a bicycle, ride a motorcycle, ski, play any kind of sports, or even just getting a little bit older like myself, chances are sometime in our life, we're going to have something plastic in our body. So, and that may not be a bad thing, but with that, we want to make sure as engineers, we do a pretty good job to do the job right. And the technology has gotten better over the years. So let's go through it. And first, I'll talk a little bit about Foster Corporation. And Weston, thanks a lot for giving a little bit of an introduction. Some folks out in the audience probably have heard of Foster, but maybe many of you haven't. But I started the company in 1989, and I was a little bit older than 18 years old, but not much. and we specialize in custom formulated products for the medical device industry. That's about 99% of our business. So we're pretty poorly diversified in one market. However, we do a lot of things in that market, and there's a lot of different types of medical and healthcare devices today, and the list keeps growing. We established a medical polymer distribution business in 2005, and one of the reasons for that is, as we'll probably talk about during the presentation, it's sort of difficult to get your hands on some of these polymers for implantable medical devices. So we wanted to develop a relationship with key strategic material partners, and as it turned out, we started distributing some of their products as well. Drug and implant delivery systems, combining a drug and a polymer. We started doing that many years ago, but in earnest in 2006. So we put in special clean rooms to do that, and that part of our business has grown quite substantially. And as you can see from the right-hand pictures, we have 4 manufacturing facilities. That third picture from the top is the delivery science building, which is dedicated exclusively to drug delivery. So it's a different regulatory pathway, and it really needed a different quality system, and it behaves differently. So it kind of needed to be in its own facility. So, but we do business in a lot of different states and a lot of different countries, and we're not a huge company, but we're not a startup either. So we do have enough resources to get projects done, and implantable projects do take a few resources, and we'll talk a little bit more about that. So we serve class 1 through 3 applications, and we like to start off early in the development formulation, work into feasibility. We do a lot of prototyping and proof of principle to get started. And then we'll do all the trials, validation, scale up, and hopefully eventually some of these products make it to market, and we do the manufacturing. We have a full regulatory department for regulatory support. We're ISO 13485, and we're also CGMP on the pharma side of things. Our pharma group specializes mostly in what's called hot melt extrusion. It's taking poorly soluble drugs and trying to melt them into pharmaceutical polymers and change the morphology so it goes from crystalline to amorphous. And that makes the unsoluble drug more soluble. So it just makes the drug work better. They have clean rooms, GMP suites over there, and very much set up to do product development, early stage clinicals, preclinical, phase 1, phase 2, phase 3, and they're geared up for manufacturing. They have a host of small scale equipment to handle grams all the way up to maybe hundreds of kilogram campaigns. And they pretty much exclusively work with drug delivery, but they also get involved in class 3 medical devices. So what's happening in the healthcare industry? I talked on a previous seminar about catheters, and almost everything still applies. Implants are getting smaller, and the reason for that is less invasive on the procedure, faster recovery. If the implant is smaller, it's not going to bother the patient as much if it stays in their body for a longer period of time. You know, something like a pacemaker, if that's relatively small, it's a little bit more comfort. And if you have to remove it at some point in time and put in another one, it's less trauma. So everything is trying to go smaller, which means more requirements of the polymer, because thinner walls, smaller size, sharper edges, or what have you, it just allows for more problems, cracking or what have you with the polymer. So it just puts a little more pressure on the polymer to do its job. Also, combining drugs with a polymer that goes inside the body. What that can do is provide localized drug delivery. I know opioid a real problem, taking over oral opioid dosage or injections. And if you can minimize the amount of that type of pain reliever by having something close to the pain source that's implantable, maybe does its job over 2 to 4 months, and then you can pull it out, all the better. So we're seeing a lot of activity in that area. So what are some of the innovations? Well, the polymers are better today, and both the durable, and I'll talk about what is a durable polymer, and also bioresorbable polymers. These materials have been around for a long time. They've just been refined over the years, and then engineers like yourself have been figuring out better ways to put all these existing technologies together to form new things. And the extrusion is getting better, the injection molding is getting better, and certainly Sodick is a part of that with their types of machines. And it enables these types of innovations. So we talked about the classification of medical devices. Class 1, you could think of those as anything that goes, it could be a medical or healthcare related, but it's typically outside the body. It may be in the hospital room, or it may go on the body, like a wound care. So those are a little bit easier to get through a regulatory. There's a wider range of materials that are available. Once you get into the class 2, these might be catheters or materials that could go into the bloodstream or in the body for maybe up to 1 to 2 or 3 weeks even. And those require more stringent regulation, possibly manufactured in a clean room. And if it goes in and around the heart, there's different classifications for that and different requirements. If it's a neurological application, that gets a little bit more stringent. So those are more like class 2B is where those are. And then class 3 is what we're talking about, implantable, typically over 30 days in the body, or it could be permanently in the body. So there's a lot of special requirements that you need to go through. And we certainly have a staff that helps with that, and the material suppliers have a staff, the ones that support this particular implantable market. And there's only a handful of suppliers that are active in this area. Many prefer to stay away, mainly because as these applications get smaller, they go inside the body, and longer term implants, you're not going to sell truckloads of polymer. So it's really a different business model for a lot of these material suppliers. Applications, and the list is really growing. I'd say month by month. A lot of facial applications where you might put in a plate to, if you had trauma, let's say you got in an accident or something like that. But even childbirth, some babies are born with deformities of their skull, and they can do an operation right at birth and put in some of these bioresorbable plates that will absorb over a period of time. So they're finding new ways to use some of these materials. Dental applications, those have been around for quite some time. But again, now it's a lot more common to get dental implants. Sutures, which, Davis and Geck in the 1960s coming up with their resorbable suture materials. Again, it's, not a staple that you have to take out, after 2 to 4 weeks. These are things that you could just leave in. So that was quite an innovation, and that's come a long way over the years. And certainly spinal for the durable polymers, and I'll talk a little bit more about polyketones for spinal cages. And, again, this is probably more trauma or, elderly, as you start to have a deterioration of the bone structure of your back. It could really help. So Soft tissue repair, that's an area we get very heavily involved. These are bone screws. And again, a lot of sports therapy, you tear a ligament, and this is a way to attach that ligament to the bone. And you really don't want a metal screw in there that you have to take out afterwards. It's much better to have something that would resorb into the bone and into your tissue so that you can excrete it and you don't have to remove it. So as I said, a lot of applications and the list keeps on growing. I can't say that we're working on thousands of applications at the moment. However, there's always dozens of applications that we're working on at any point in time. So we'll switch over to talk a little bit about the polymer types, because this is really what makes it all happen. And they fall into two categories. One is the biodurable, and these are the non-resorbable materials, typically used for a long-term or a permanent implant, which would be a spinal cage and that sort of thing. You could also have a more flexible material like an ethylene vinyl acetate or a TPU, polyurethane. These could be used for wire coatings that are on pacemakers and those types of applications. And as we'll talk about, EVA and TPU are also pretty good drug delivery materials. So those are materials that will not resorb in the body, stay in the body. If it's a case of like a drug delivery, you may implant a soft material like an EVA that's drug loaded. It does its job in 3 months, and then you might go in and pull it out. So the material has to stay solid or durable over that period of time so it doesn't fall apart when you do try to pull it out. And then the bioresorbable polymers. And these materials have been around, again, since probably the 1960s and have gotten better over the years. And there's various formulations of these types of materials, but there's basically 4 major categories of bioresorbable, and I'll talk about each one. But these are absorbed and metabolized in the body over time. It's not like an ice cube where it just goes in the body and it melts into the tissue. It is a polymer that it hydrolyzes and gets like embedded with the body fluids, and it breaks down the polymer into smaller and smaller fragments that then are absorbed. So paying careful attention to how, where these things are in the body and making sure the fragments, don't cause a problem. Those are some of the things that, certainly the doctors are concerned with, and the scientists that are developing these things are very concerned with. So as processors, we have to make sure that we don't do anything to change the way that these things absorb into the body. And in fact, we try and enhance them. They're useful in both, I do have to say, structural and non-structural, because some of these orthopedic applications, screws and so forth, have to have pretty good strength for torqueability. So, and I'll go through each one of these so we can look at what the differences are. So biodurable polymers. These could stay in your body for, up to several years. The one that comes to mind is polyether ether ketone for spinal cages, polyethylene, polypropylene, which are used for implantable meshes. That could be a hernia mesh and that sort of type of application. And then polyurethane, which is commonly used as a lead material for wire coating on pacemakers. So, and also in and around the heart valves. So these materials have been around for a long time. It's not, off the shelf polyurethanes. These are special polyurethanes that have been tested many, many years, have a great track record of being in the body. So again, when we start off a project, we try and work with materials that have a long history of safety. Polyethylene, simple structure. The molecular weight is very important on polyethylene, and you'll see that in a lot of hip implants where they're using high molecular weight polyethylene. Most of those are not melt processable by, the means that we probably process, but they're formed in different ways or machined. But it's excellent material, biologically inert, good chemical resistance, good mechanical properties, and you can tune the molecular weight for the application. They are finding more applications in some of these facial structures and just for trauma. Polypropylene, the same thing. Non-toxic material, a little bit higher rigidity than polyethylene, but it does create some kind of a flexible hinge type property, which is important in certain applications, certainly in these woven meshes. It seems to have pretty good application. And these materials are readily moldable, injection moldable. Polyurethanes could be rigid, but mostly are flexible, and they could be hydrophilic, meaning absorbing liquids and moisture, or hydrophobic. Very good tear resistance, strength, and used in a lot of catheters and tubes that are left inside the body, but also certain mechanical devices that require some flex. But again, you don't want to stress crack over a period of time. So there's a range of these polyurethanes that have been tested, and again, a good proven track record. EVA, used for mostly devices, and again, this is my experience, mostly implants that are removed over a period of time. I can't think of an EVA implant that stays in the body for, let's say, 6 months or years. That is truly inside the body. There are some applications that are in and around the body that they're there a lot longer. But one of the outstanding features of an EVA, because you can control or change the vinyl acetate content, and that will allow different drug delivery rates. So you can get very, very good controlled delivery rates out of an ethylene vinyl acetate, and it's been a very successful material for drug delivery. PEEK, this is kind of the super polymer of the implantables, and this material has been around since probably the 1970s and started to be commercialized in the 1980s. Very high performance, high temperature material. Initially, it was designed for aerospace, or I should say when it was developed, the first markets were aerospace. And then probably towards the middle of the 1980s, doctors and medical device engineers started taking a look at it for different types of implantable applications. Of course, the material suppliers weren't too thrilled about putting a new material inside the body, but over time, it demonstrated that it had a very good safety track record. So excellent physical property matrix. On its own, even without reinforcement, it has tremendous stiffness. Like an unfilled polyketone has the stiffness of a glass reinforced polycarbonate. So it could handle very rigorous applications, almost impervious to all chemicals. Not too much will attack it. And the one drawback, it does require some special equipment to process. It processes at a very elevated temperature, which means your tooling needs to be designed for high temperature. So this way here, it doesn't seize up on you. And also you're going to need heated tooling to mold it. So a much more difficult material to work with, but outstanding properties. It's a crystalline material. It starts off, if you quench it, it's amorphous. You really want to get it into the crystalline stage to take advantage of the outstanding property. So that might mean post-annealing of the product. And there's methods to do that. So applications, sutures, dental devices, orthopedic, bone plates, joint replacement, and a lot of spinal applications. You could imagine the spine carries a lot of weight, and polyketones and these durable polymers could withstand those types of rigor. So the non-durable or the bioresorbable, as I said, these materials break down in the body, and over time, and some of them do take a long time to fully and safely absorb. They are hydrolytically unstable, which is one of the ways, one of their outstanding properties, but it also makes them more difficult to manufacture, especially to process, because they degrade pretty readily, even during the melt processing stage or the storage stage. So very susceptible to moisture degradation and so forth. So there is some special handling, a lot of special handling that you need. You can fine tune these now with the different blends so that they are absorbable in a controllable and finite period of time. This market is growing, although this year with COVID, we've seen, there just hasn't been as many surgeries this year, for anything that's not life-threatening. And if these are sports related, sort of been on the sideline this year, but it's coming back, and it's a growing market. And you can tune the bioresorbable polymers for mechanical performance as well. And as I talk about some of the polymers, we'll see how we can mix and match. If you pull out any one of these material suppliers catalogs, you'll see thousands of products. They more or less fall into these four categories: the PLAs, which are the lactides, the PGAs, which are the glycolides, the PLGAs, which is kind of a combo of those top two, and it's a copolymer, and the polycaprolactone. Each one has some unique properties, and we'll go through each one. This one here, and there's only a few manufacturers, commercial manufacturers, Corbion, Evonik are the big players in this area. And Corbion is basic in the saccharide, so they developed a lactic acid where this polymer is made from. So it's a ring opening reaction, and I'm not privy to all of the science behind that, but two versions of it. One is the PLLA and the PDLA, and that's just a configuration of the methyl group on the chain. So and that has some more than subtle changes in the physical properties of the material. So PLA in general, slow rate of absorption. It could be greater than 2 years. Highly crystalline, glass transition temperature, kind of a medium glass transition temperature. Melt point, which again, it's very processable, and that is not a high melt point, which is good. And it has very good load-bearing applications, and that's one of the reasons it's finding a lot of use in these orthopedic applications. The D series, or the D version of it, has a lot of the same attributes, faster absorption rate. So why you would use one or the other would be based on the absorption. Polyglycolides, highly crystalline, lower solubility in water. Now this polymer absorbs a lot quicker, 1 month. So you probably wouldn't want to use it in an orthopedic application where you require the polymer to pick up some of the strength of the bone if the bone is healing. So, that's something to take into consideration. And it loses most of its mass, or more, almost all of its mass, in 6 to 12 months. So this is something that does resorb a lot quicker. Higher melting point, lower glass transition temperature, and again, high modulus. You can copolymerize the two, PLA and PGA, and get every range in the middle. And typically a 50-50 ratio gives you something that absorbs in about 2 months. Polycaprolactone, low melting point, and that's very important if you're trying to put a drug in the polymer. And you might use polycaprolactone as an additive for one of the other polymers. Again, to change the properties and also to change the absorption rate. So what are some of the factors that affect the degradation other than the polymer? Well, I mean, it's certainly the polymer itself, but molecular weight and molecular weight distribution play a huge role. And the manufacturer usually has a range of molecular weights for that particular polymer, but in the processing and handling of it, like, you know, when we do the compounding or blending, we have to pay careful attention that we don't knock down the molecular weight too much. And even in the extrusion of a tube or a fiber, if somebody's doing that, or if you're injection molding a part, you want to make sure that you're not knocking down the molecular weight. That is one of the reasons we went out and got a Sodick, and a lot of our customers have a Sodick machine with that 2-stage and the lack of the check valve. We were able to maintain more molecular weight on that machine than some of the other machines that we've had some test samples run on. Certainly morphology, crystalline or amorphous, that makes a big difference. Where the polymer is implanted in the body makes a huge difference. Part shape and design, huge difference. And then, you know, is it in the bone or is it surrounded by fluid? It's going to make a difference. So to the right, we could see that depending on the polymer, PGA, you know, polyglycolic acid, is going to absorb in, you know, just a few months, whereas the PLA versions could be years. And again, applications, a lot of tissue fixation, bone screws, biodegradable stents is a newer type of application, and controlled drug delivery. So how do we get involved, and what do we actually do on the compounding side or the blending side? Well, with a drug, we can add an active pharmaceutical into the polymer, and we'll do that on a twin screw extruder. On the orthopedic side, for bone screws, we'll add some kind of a bone mineral, and it's usually TCP, which is tricalcium phosphate. That is a mineral that helps the bone regenerate or grow. So if you're implanting a screw into a bone, as the polymer starts to resorb, the calcium phosphate is there to help the bone strengthen and also fill the bone. You'll see like TCP on its own, blended in the dental office, and it's used as a jaw bone filler. You know, so TCP has been used for years and years and years to support bone growth, and it's only really been maybe the last 20 years, 25 years, where it's been used in orthopedic. However, it's used a lot more now. Hydroxyapatite is another bone mineral material. Something else that we've used, although not a lot, it's the newer technology, is some of these resorbable glass. We've done a few experiments with that. We don't have a commercial product, but that's another additive that could go into these bioresorbable polymers. Radiopaque fillers, barium sulfate. Again, most of these polymers are transparent to X-ray. So if you want to see the polymer in wherever you're implanting, you might use a barium sulfate or bismuth. I'd have to say there's not a lot of suppliers that allow those ingredients to be used. However, there are a few applications. So those are case by case, but it is done and it can be done. So the biocomposites, and that's the term that's used in the orthopedic when you blend a resorbable polymer with one of these bioceramics, like a TCP or hydroxyapatite. And the big application for that is bone screws, bone plates, fasteners. And we'll do that in a twin screw extruder. We have, we'll start off with the development. We have a non-GMP bay where we can use R&D equipment, and then we'll move that into the clean room, certified clean room, where we can do the clinical trial or the production. Then the drug delivery applications, again, depending upon the polymer that you're using, you usually have two modes of delivery. One is what's called diffusion controlled. This would be a durable polymer, and I'm just going to say an ethylene vinyl acetate or a polyurethane. So you would start off with a material. Typically, it would be an elastomer, so something soft, because the diffusion behaves like a gas or a moisture transferring through the polymer. So you need some mobility through the polymer so that these active ingredients could get out. And these, depending on the drug load and the polymer, and let's say it's a vinyl acetate content, you're going to get a release rate. And we have some equipment, test equipment, that could test for drug delivery release. On the resorbable polymers, you'll get more of a erodible controlled release, where not only you get a little bit of diffusion, but the majority of the release is by the erosion of the polymer itself, or the resorption of the polymer, and that's taking the active ingredient with it. So you can't use just any polymer or any drug. You typically are limited to small molecules, and I'll try and describe what that might be. But certainly all of your over-the-counter medications like ibuprofen and pain relievers of that sort are small molecules. Peptides, proteins, biologics. You hear of all these new things. Those are longer molecules. Those do not stand up to the rigor of polymer processing or the heat. So the shear rate, the temperature is just degrades those types of drugs. So we're pretty much limited to small molecules, and this is the reason why. If you can see the temperature profile of where these polymers process, like a PLA, PGA, polyethylene oxide, those are more pharmaceutical polymers to the left, but you're looking at polyurethane, polyethylene, and even PEEK all the way to the right. You wouldn't use PEEK. You wouldn't try and melt a drug into PEEK. It would just destroy it at that temperature. But there are certain polymers and with certain drugs like ibuprofen, pain reliever, very common. Nifedipine. I mean, these are model drugs that you would use to see if you can develop a product, because these drugs are available. Nifedipine, that's a high blood pressure medication. Carbamazepine is more for pain relief and seizures. So depending on the drug, the polymer, you do not have to be completely below the processing temperature of the polymer, as long as you stay below the degradation time of the drug. So the drug could see heat for a short period of time, the same as you can put your hand through a flame on a candle for a couple of seconds, but you don't want to leave it there. So that's the same thing here. So you could work with different drugs and a higher melting polymer. You just have to watch very critically the residence time. Again, application, drug-eluting stents, any kind of antimicrobial bone cement, IUDs, transdermal patches, transmucosal patches, and also as an opioid treatment where something would be delivered under the skin. It would be implanted under the skin, stay there for 2 or 3 months until possibly you can, get off and relieve yourself from the dependency of opioids. So we talked about the polymers and how do you actually get involved in these things and work through a process. And so the first thing is looking at the polymer selection. You start off with a water-soluble polymer. Again, if this is just going in the body for minutes, or if it's an oral delivery system, and again, that's not something that you would injection mold, although we are seeing some of these pharmaceutical delivery systems being injection molded today, and also even a longer range delivery system up to 1 to 2 weeks that is oral dosage, and it stays in your stomach for that period of time where it releases a drug. That's potentially an injection molding application. But if we're working on bioresorbables, which are typically months, and those are the orthopedic or implantables, which could be in your body for years, could be spinal cage and that sort of thing, spinal applications, polyketones requiring some special equipment. First thing we look at when we're talking about an application is the availability of the polymer and the type of application, and is the raw material supplier willing to support that application. And that usually starts with some kind of a supply agreement. And, we have some of these in place already, but usually they're a case-by-case basis. The cost of these materials tends to be very high. So we'll try and see if there's some non-GMP material available, or start off with some standard materials that we might be able to work with to at least do the prototyping, and then work our way into the GMP grades of these materials. But the cost, as you could imagine, they're not selling truckloads of material, so the cost for these polymers could be very high. Storage conditions, the quality requirements, and everything has specifications. So understanding what's going to be required, and if you can meet the specifications, very, very important. Sometimes you have to turn down the applications if there's just too many unknowns and restraints, and then maybe come back to it later on, a year from now, when things change. But if you're going to work through all of this, you just you plow through all the data. You want to make sure that you have ISO 13485. If it's going to be a drug, you need to follow all of the FDA regulations, which is CGMP for pharmaceutical. The implant products follow Part 820, which is an extension, or I'd say above the 13485. And then the pharmaceutical is 210, 211. Those are government regulations. Those aren't certifications, but those are enforced by the FDA. So you may get audited, you may not. Looking at the equipment and temperature limitations, we said Sodick lends itself very well to these types of applications because of the precision. What we liked about the Sodick is the 2-stage molding. You can carefully manage the melting of the polymer in the extrusion, and then with the elimination of a check ring, you're not degrading the material going through that check ring, especially if it's a material like PLA, which is going to degrade and just get specks, black specks, and so forth. The Sodick machine is also high torque, and some of these bioresorbable polymers require a lot of torque to push them through the screws. So this is a machine that could handle that. And also it's a very high pressure machine. So you can get extremely high injection pressures to fill the mold. So again, you need the right equipment. If it's working with a implantable or a drug, you probably want special metallurgy, which typically would be stainless steel. And the same thing on the compounding side, twin screw extruder. When we're doing these implantables in drug delivery, it's all stainless steel, barrel screws taken apart each time, special cleaning validations, and there's just special requirements on doing that. The test methods, and again, some of the test methods may need to be validated, but the things that are important, if it's a drug, the release rate, the stability of the drug, solubility of the drug, is the drug going to stay stable, and so forth. The crystallinity of the polymer, which we can check. Particle size, if there's an ingredient going in there. And also, if we have to mill the polymer, we do a lot of milling of the polymer because it might be blended before it's compounded. So you want to get good blend uniformity. So we have GMP milling down to the micron size. Certainly managing the molecular weight, we can measure that, and the inherent viscosities of the material. Now we do that two ways. The IV, which is a soluble viscosity when we're doing the bioresorbable. And we also have the capillary rheometry, which is a melt, and we can get the shear rate viscosity curves, and that's going to be important for designing the tooling. So as I said, we like to get involved pretty early on, and it's a real team effort with the customer, the machine manufacturer, the polymer manufacturer, and if we're doing some of the blending and the testing, we'll be involved early on. We try and get everybody involved early on, and we're just trying to get the project off the ground by developing a proof of principle. Can this even be done? Before you could even get started. So we try and have in our lab a little bit of capability to do, like grams of almost anything and produce it in a shape, whether it be a molded shape, a tubing, a film, or, even if it's just pellets, we'll try and have that available so that a customer could look at it and say, okay, we want to go to the next step. And then once we start developing the compound, we're working with somebody that's going to injection mold it, and we transfer it out to that. And then we work on doing all the validations and then making sure that you can ramp it up into production. There's our Sodick machine. That's a real live picture of the one in our shop. It's GL100A. Really happy with that machine. We got it, and again, this was the expertise on Weston. We went back and forth quite a bit. We got it with a 32 millimeter plunger because again, doing it for development, we didn't know what we were going to be trying to develop on it, but we wanted to make some bigger plates just so that they could be machined later on, or we may need to do some small like test bars where you don't have a lot of material. So we didn't want the machine so big that we were going to degrade the material. So we have a 28 millimeter screw on the extrusion portion and a 32 millimeter plunger. And that seems to cover quite a wide range for us on the development side. So in summary, before you get started, you need to know what the application is so that you can work with the material suppliers, because that's going to dictate what material you could even get your hands on, let alone if that material is suitable for that application. The regulatory aspect is very rigorous. However, there is a pathway, and we do have a whole team that works on that day in and day out. So we have a lot of data. We have some of the device master files with some materials in already that have been used for many years. So if you start off with one of those, it's a little bit easier. But chances are developing something new, we have to go through this pathway on the regulatory. And as I said, more and more applications are lending themselves to implantable polymers. And as engineers, if we can be creative and really make these polymers and systems robust, we can do a lot of good for healthcare and the outcomes of patients. So I think that's it, and certainly have a lot of time for questions, and I want to thank everybody for hanging in there. Okay, back over to you, Weston.
Hey, thanks, Larry. Very, very informative stuff there. We greatly appreciate it. It looks like the attendees did as well. We got quite a few questions coming in here.
Okay.
Oh, hey, Len. Len Hampton is joining us here as well, our national sales manager.
Yeah, sorry I was a little bit late. My last meeting ran a little bit over than I expected, Larry. But
Okay.
Fantastic job.
Thank you. Thank you. You missed the opening story of.
I know. I'll replay. But hey, thanks so much for joining our Sodick and Friends webinar series. You're the eighth one, and I think scheduled up through even December, I think. But you know, you sharing your experience with implantable materials is just wonderful, and wonderful to partner with you as well.
Well, thanks for having us, and thanks for thinking about us.
Absolutely. Kohei, great job opening. I caught that little bit, but thank you. Kohei is our vice president. Thanks for your intro and with the videos and things like that. Appreciate it very much. Weston always does a great job. He's our host for these webinar series. So again, Weston, thank you. And yeah, get on with your Q&A. Thanks for everybody for joining us and spending some of your day with us. It was one of the best presentations I've witnessed so far. So thanks again, Larry.
Thank you. You probably tell each one of the speakers the same thing.
you know, Len's a salesman, right? To touch real quickly on something Len mentioned there, we did get a couple of questions revolving around this webinar being available by video. And we have recorded it. We will get that out. Reach out to one of us here for a copy of it. Any one of us can get you over a copy once it's available. First question for you, Larry. Is there a low shore grade of TPU, something close to like maybe 40A, that will directly co-extrude with nylon 12?
To my knowledge, there is not a 40 shore A polyurethane. Are we talking about implantable polyurethane or just in general? Because you could plasticize a polyurethane to get it to 40A, but I wouldn't recommend it for a longer term implantable material. So that's I don't have a lot of experience in that for an implantable. We'd have to plasticize it and then do something so that it adheres, and the polyurethane will adhere to nylon pretty readily because its surface will latch on. We could do something to help it, but we do not have anything that I would recommend for implantable for that one. So we'd have to come back to the drawing board on that one if that's the application. We'd have to see what other things could be done, or do a real good search. But that would be a new one for us. So sorry. Well, if we can get the name and who's asking, we'll get some information on it.
Absolutely. Next question to come in for you. Can one molding machine be used for all these types of materials?
I would say you could use, let's say, a Sodick, and a Sodick could mold PEEK. It could mold polypropylene, it could mold a bioresorbable. I think once you get the machine in and start molding one of those materials versus the other, it becomes that kind of machine. Because if you're running it high temp, it's going to be a high temp machine, and you're going to have different equipment on it and different tooling, maybe certainly a different screw and barrel and maybe metallurgy to run that kind of material versus a bioresorbable. So you probably most definitely would want a machine for high temp, and then another machine to run, let's say, the bioresorbable polymers. You could possibly run some of the softer urethanes and EVAs or polypropylene implantable materials on the same machine as the bioresorbable. But again, the metallurgy might be a little different, and also the size of the barrel and plunger it would be different. So again, you would customize the machine for what you're molding to get the best result.
Wonderful, thank you. Next one comes out as, do you supply PDLLA or mixed PDLLA with drug to coat on implants?
We could blend that, and I mean that's definitely something that's a program we would get involved with. I mean, do we have that stuff off the shelf? I mean, no, everything is 100% custom, and anytime you're working with an active pharmaceutical ingredient, there's a lot more rigor that goes in depending on what the active is. But those are programs and that material we do have experience with. So that whoever's asking that one, we would be able to help.
Wonderful, wonderful. What do you use for a cert or cleaning confirmation before running an implantable material?
What do we use to confirm that the equipment is clean? Is that the question?
Yeah, cleaning confirmation of it.
Okay, all right. We have standard operating procedures. We do a cleaning validation where we'll swab, and again, this comes out of the pharma, where you swab after you clean it. You swab the metals or the components, and you calculate the total surface areas of it, and then we'll take that swab, and then we'll go to, I believe it's a gas chromatograph, to look at the percentage of any contaminant, or if it's a drug, we're looking for any trace of the drug that might be there. But we'll be able to identify how much of the total organic content is left on the metallurgy. And depending on what it is, if it's a drug delivery, you have to be like 1/1000. If it's a implantable, you have more leeway. But I mean, certainly to the eye, it is super clean, but we have to swab it and then check for the total organic content to see if there's some residue. And of course, the cleaning solvents or whatever we use that we're wiping down screws and barrels, those have to be all approved. So it's not like, they're bringing in, dozens of cleaning agents. You have like one approved cleaning agent, for that clean room. And that does the job once you do the validation. And we could help. I mean, if somebody is interested in that, we have procedures. We've been doing this for quite a while, so we can help them write some of those procedures and make some recommendation as what cleaning agents are best.
Wonderful. Thank you.
We don't. I mean, it's not like typical injection molding where you purge the machine and then you get into the next run. The machine is taken apart, and that's part and parcel to really the cost involved in doing some of these things. If you're switching from material to material.
Great, Larry. Thank you. Here's one about the cost and availability of implantable materials.
Okay.
Can you share?
All right. There's a couple of materials that we have pretty good relationships with the suppliers, and those materials are available. There's a polyketone that is available, polypropylene. There's I think we can work with the polyurethane supplier, which is Lubrizol is one of the leaders in supplying those materials for implantables. DSM to a lesser extent for us anyways, not maybe overall, but for us. Certainly Corbion, great relationship with Corbion and Evonik. So we can get those materials. They are very expensive. You expect to pay $1,000 per kg for GMP materials. Sometimes the material is not available in non-GMP versions, but if you're using a polyurethane, you might be able to prototype with like an extrusion grade, medical grade polyurethane, and then go to one of the implantables, which are going to be more expensive. But the bioresorbables could be $1,000. Certainly a polyketone implantable is going to be in the $1,000. Typically 50 to 100 times a non-implantable material. And the reason being, there's just a lot of regulatory and there's a lot of hand holding, and that you're not going to be selling gaylords or truckloads of the material. 100 kilos, 1,000 kilos is a lot of material. So
Great. Do you guys provide rheological data like shear rate, viscosity curves for these materials?
we do, and we're working on a project now because we're doing some design work, and we had to characterize the material. So we're getting more of the rheological. We don't have, because all the materials are, pretty much custom. We do have some data, and some of the raw material suppliers have some of that data available, and we could share that with you. But we would custom develop a lot of that data, based on what the compound is or what the blend ratio is. And then we have in-house capability of doing both solubility, viscosity, solution viscosity, and if it's a bioresorbable solution viscosity, or melt viscosities with capillary rheometer. And we've got a couple of Dynisco capillary rheometers here.
All right. This question comes in, says you utilize the Sodick as preferable since it is low shear preserving, right? Have you trialed other compounding methods that are better ratio, distributive, or dispersive, such as bus?
So I'm trying to understand the question. Is it regarding compounding or molding? Is it blending of the materials or going into the injection molding?
Right, and to me, they're asking about the compounding methods. So
okay, yeah, the compounding method, the preferred compounding method is twin screw extrusion, mainly because we can program the screws to get the right amount of shear and blending without overworking the material, but also we can change the addition of the ingredients and the length of the barrel, or change the length of the barrel. So we may decide to go to a shorter barrel if it's a material that is very time sensitive, residence time dependent. And using a twin screw extruder allows us to manage the temperature a little bit better than on a single screw extruder. Now that's on the blending portion of it. On the injection molding, We do have a couple of older Arborgs that we make test samples on, but we haven't been successful in molding the bioresorbable composites, mainly because the residence time or just the shear rate profile on that machine is just not right for the materials that we were trying to develop. So the Sodick, I mean, I'm not plugging, Sodick in any way, because Arborg makes a great machine as well. But we've had good luck with the Sodick.
Thank you, Larry. You have implantable grade polypropylene for mesh purposes available.
Yes. Yes. We just picked up that product. Of course, it's been around for quite some time. And what is that Protex? Yes. The brand name is called Protex. And we get that out of Ireland. We have a supplier in Ireland, and that material has been tested for many, many years, and it is available. Again, we put our customer also in contact with our supplier, and we facilitate all the development.
Excellent. Maybe we'll give a couple more minutes here. That looks like the last question that has come in. If there's anything else you want to share, Len, or you?
No, I'm good.
Okay.
Thank you.
Excellent.
Yeah, I think maybe Weston, I know you take care of everything. As far as the questions, maybe, well, I'm sure you share with Larry anyway, and then he's of course free to interface with if it requires a longer answer or some time on the phone to get together
Right.
with some of the questionnaires here.
Perfect.
Yeah, if there's any questions, we would love to get them. Again, I don't spend all my time in the lab anymore. They kind of keep me up in the office and hands off so I don't get in trouble. But we have some pretty good engineers that do this stuff, and they could probably do a good job answering those questions.
Perfect. Here's another one. Great question just come in, Larry. Is there a preferred sterilization method for degradable resins? Maybe gamma or ETO?
Yeah, actually, those are the two. And the bioresorbable are capable of both gamma and ETO sterilization.
So what's the impact to the performance?
I would say it's very minimal, but certainly that would be more, that would be data that our customer would have. I don't know if they would be willing to share that for a specific device, because usually it's the finished product that gets sterilized, that's kind of out of our hands at that point. However, we do know that both gamma and ETO sterilization methods are used. Of course, of ETO, there's a time set aside so it can outgas. But I do know both of those methods are used, and the products. I mean, and they have a good track record. It's been used for 20 years. So I know it's used successfully. But what it does to the properties? Does it degrade the properties? I'm sure it has some effect. It has an effect on just about every polymer, even some of them ever so slightly. It's probably doing something, but not enough to render it, not effective. So those are the two sterilization methods that are commonly used. Of course, you wouldn't want to steam sterilize anything like that. Even probably the only one steam sterilizable is PEEK. You probably PEEK would be the one that you would steam sterilize. on a regular basis. But if it's, sterilized going inside the body, it's only one time, hopefully.
Right. Last question I'm seeing here. What is the shelf life and storage conditions for these materials?
Polyketones, keep them in the original containers or in a sealed container, probably last forever. It's very, very stable. Polyurethanes, we usually cert those materials for 2 years. Purge those materials, especially if they're implantable for storage. You want to have them vacuum sealed or purged with nitrogen and really tightly sealed up in a foil lined container. On the bioresorbable, those materials are purged with nitrogen, vacuum packed and sealed in foil containers, and usually stored at a cool temperature. And I'm going to say 40 degrees Fahrenheit. And I believe it's about a year on that one. So there is, certainly more cautious on the bioresorbable, because of, they're designed to degrade. But if you protect them with the right packaging, they'll last, certainly for a year. You can store them at ambient temperatures, but I would be concerned that the shelf life would be reduced.
Great.
Yep. So we have refrigerators. We have, certified refrigerators. And we do the storage in there and we don't have any issues.
Excellent. That looks like the last question we have, Larry. So again, on behalf of myself, Len, Kohei, and the team here at Sodick, really want to say thank you. Very powerful today. Great.
You're welcome. Thanks for having us, Kohei. Thank you, Len. Always great to see you, even though it was over video this time. So hopefully we get a chance to go to another MPE soon.
Oh, I'm looking forward to it. Believe me.
Yeah.
Thanks again so much, Larry. That was fantastic.
All right. Take care, guys. We'll see you.
Right.
Take care,
Thanks,
everybody.
Larry.
Thanks for joining.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.